guys probably think that Cape York is the #1 off-road destination in Australia. Well, let me tell you guys, it's been graded, it's crowded, it's overdone, and there's not a whole lot of four-wheel driving to be had except for croc-infested rivers. And who wants to be doing that unless you're a Japanese backpacker? I've been producing four-wheel drive TV for 20 years now. I've seen and done it all. So this video is all about my top picks for the best actual four-wheel drive destinations that Australia has to offer. Now, if you guys make it to the end of the video, I'm going to tell you my #1 mistake in the last 20 years of four-wheel driving. We're going to go through a state-by-state analysis, giving you the pros, the cons, the highlights, the lows, and what you need to go four-wheel driving in those specific destinations. This is a scientific, data-driven analysis of the best opportunities for off-roading in Australia. We're going to be looking at the biggest challenges, the best views, our favourite tracks, and of course, is it technical or touring type of four-wheel driving? Let's start with my home state, Victoria. Now, Victoria has got everything from deserts on one side to the high country and Alps over in the east. In almost any direction out of Melbourne, you can travel for 1 hour and you can have a picnic with your girlfriend in front of a waterfall, or you can have your vehicle on its roof. The Victorian High Country is the pinnacle of off-roading right here in Victoria, and it's unique for the whole of Australia. It's got the best scenery and the best four-wheel drive tracks for mountainous, snow-covered terrain. The two main challenges when you want to go off-roading in Victoria is firstly, where to go. We've got so much to do in such a small area that there's so much to choose from. Get onto our mates at New Tracks for all the information on that. The second thing you've got to watch out for are the cops.
What is the charge?
And thankfully, there's a couple of hotspots that we know where they're the worst, and we steer clear of those destinations.
Eating a meal, a succulent Chinese meal.
When you take it to the challenges that I mentioned and the opportunities, it's a really good average. I'm going to give it 7 out of 10. Guys, it almost doesn't matter which hill you get to the top of in the Victorian High Country. The views there are second to none. These are the Alps of Australia. These put us on par with Europe. The views are stunning, and the climb to the top is worth every single rotation of your tyres. It's a once in a lifetime, put it on your bucket list. You've got to do it. It's 10 out of 10. Two of my favourite tracks in the Victorian High Country, and two very different tracks showing just how diverse the area are Deep Creek 1 and the Barkly River Jeep track. Now, the Barkly River Jeep track is an absolute challenge. You want 35s, lockers, mud tyres, and it is hardcore, hard going all the way from the start to the finish. For that trip, you've definitely got to be prepared, and a set of air lockers will definitely be your best friend on the way up that climb. Deep Creek 1 though is a very different sort of challenge. It's steep, it's tight, getting down in there. Now, if you're going down with a trailer, which is not what we advise at all, but we did it in one episode, you definitely want to have a rear winch mounted just to get your trailer around some of those hairpin turns. When you get into the creek, it's all nice, smooth and easy going. It is picturesque, scenic and breathtaking down in there. It is an awesome experience. But in the high country, you've got to be prepared for changes in weather. And it's the exit of Deep Creek 1 that can cause a whole range of dramas. Now, we faced those, we used our winches, we used everything we had to get ourselves out by dark, but it's a major lesson in all the things that can go wrong and all the major challenges that you're going to face in the Victorian High Country. Maybe I'm a little biased because Victoria is my home and I've done so much work in the Victorian High Country, but I can't pick between the two tracks, Barkly River Jeep track or Deep Creek 1. You vote in the comments below which one should be the #1 track, but I'm putting 2 in. They're definitely 8 out of 10 tracks. Victoria's got it all. It's well worth touring, it's well worth being technical, but when it comes to pure four-wheel driving, if you're not good at technical four-wheel driving from mud to rock crawling, don't bother coming, guys. Stay at home and watch TV. So my ranking for Victoria as the style of four-wheel driving, it's technical. So as a technical destination, I give it an 8 out of 10. Crossing right across the continent, next up we've got one of my favourites, Western Australia. Four-wheel driving in Western Australia is broken into 2 categories. You've got the short trips around Perth, then you've got the bigger, longer touring trips well out of Perth, up north, right throughout the Kimberley region, and what a destination that is. The biggest challenge for four-wheel drivers in Western Australia, whether they're doing something local around Perth or travelling further up north, is the distance. You've got to be prepared with a long-range fuel tank. Just to go to a reasonable destination outside of Perth, you're looking at 2, 3, even 4 hours of transit time for a day trip. So make sure you start your day early. Now, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 as a challenge, but not because of how hard it is, but because of how beautiful the scenery is, and it's well worth doing. Whilst Mundaring, Lancelin, Blackwood and the tall timbers of Pemberton are fantastic locations around Perth. I'm going to say that my favourite track is the road out to Mitchell Falls. Now you turn off the Gibb River Road and it is a long, hard, rocky road that is absolutely torturous on suspension. So if you're heading to Western Australia with the long distances, as well as a long range tank, you're going to need a really decent suspension, and make sure that you let your tyres down to ensure that your tyres, your suspension, your vehicle and yourself is going to last through all of the hours and hours of corrugations. The road out to the Mitchell Falls crosses many, many rivers, but it's the walk into Mitchell Falls which was an absolute highlight for me. The Indigenous paintings, the scenery, the landscape, the wildlife and of course the falls themselves are a must-do, once-in-a-lifetime location that you've got to get to. Mitchell Falls isn't really a hard track, there's plenty to see and do, and it's more about the destination. I'm going to give that a 7 out of 10. The best view in Western Australia is something that we're actually at risk of losing at the moment. It is the jet boat ride through the horizontal waterfalls. That view, that area, the terrain, the whole experience and the atmosphere is undeniably one of the highlights of my touring and travelling Australia over the last 20 years. So guys, pay attention, jump online, do some research, and when those surveys coming up asking you to vote to not have that area closed, make sure you make your name count, because we want to keep that area open for generations to come. The horizontal waterfalls is just amazing, guys. I'm going to give that a 9 out of 10. There is so much technical off-roading to be done in Western Australia. There is a fantastic competition scene. But when you look at the size of the state, I've got to classify the whole state overall as a touring destination. As a touring destination, you will not get anywhere better in Australia than Western Australia. I'm going to give that a 10 out of 10. Let's head southeast to the amazing destination, the Apple Isle. It is, of course, Tasmania. One of my favourite spots for four-wheel driving. Now, a lot of hardcore four-wheel drivers, they know all about Tasmania, but a lot of people don't know actually what there is down there, how many tracks there are, and how much fun you can have in your four-wheel drive. Four-wheel driving in Tasmania is divided into two distinct groups. You've got the West Coast and the East Coast. Now, people mainly talk about the West Coast as being the destination, but today, guys, I'm not going to talk about the West because everybody knows the West. I'm actually going to talk about a hot spot of mine that I discovered well before I started Four Wheel Drive TV, and I took the Four Wheel Drive TV team back there not that long ago to explore the northeast corner of Tasmania. The biggest challenge with Tasmania, unless you live there, is getting your vehicle there. You've got to catch the ferry to get your vehicle across, and that costs money. It's a boring trip that you've got to pay for. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Now, whilst I've got some favourite tracks and destinations in that northeast corner, I'm going to have to stick with Climbys as one of my #1 tracks in the entire world. Picture this. It's a rocky ravine that drops down to a small waterfall. You've got a little river to cross. That river is dropping, cascading into, not the forest, into the ocean. So on the east side, you've got like a coastal savanna with low-lying scrub leading up into these majestic mountains. On the west side, you've got cliffs dropping into the ocean, and you're on top of these rocks, on the edge of the cliff, dropping down into this ravine. It is just an experience unlike any other you will ever do. The views, the angles, the drop-in, everything about it is just absolutely exhilarating. Climbys is just an amazing track, and I'm going to give that a 10 out of 10. Looking at that view out your windscreen as you are crawling your way down those rocks into that gap on Climbys track, across that cascading waterfall into the ocean. It is just insane. The views in general in Tasmania are absolutely breathtaking. I'm going to have to give those a 9 out of 10. Tasmania is not so much of a touring state. There are very short distances. There's plenty of touring to be done down there, but the tracks are tough when you find the right tracks. So I'm going to say that Tasmania is a technical four-wheel driving state. For technical driving, when you get into those harder tracks down in Tasmania, I'm going to have to give that a 10 out of 10. You've got to be well prepared, you've got to have the right gear, and you've definitely got to know how to use it all. From Tasmania, we're heading to Australia's second biggest state. It is, of course, Queensland. Queensland is a big state. You've got coastal regions, you've got tropical areas, you've got outback Queensland, but the hotspot, the hub of off-roading in Queensland is the area down around Brisbane, and it's broken into two very distinct types of four-wheel driving. You've got the free access to the beaches, which are great for weekend getaways, but you've also got a whole stack of four-wheel drive parks because there isn't a whole lot of tracks, trails and public land to go four-wheel driving on out of Brisbane. The biggest challenge in Queensland are all the tracks that are being closed down and how hard it is to get into locations for legal four-wheel driving. So that's a serious problem. I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10. You really need to speak to the people in parks, in the plantations and in the four-wheel drive clubs to find out what is going on and what you can do to protect our rights to access for four-wheel drive tracks in Queensland. Queensland is also famous for its island four-wheel driving. You've got Fraser, Stradbroke and Moreton. Back on the mainland though, one of our favourite trips of recent years was a run we did from Noosa up to Rainbow Beach. A highlight of that run north, and my best view in Queensland, is going to be Double Island Point. Now this is not such a tough four-wheel driving location, but it's a great spot to stop, park your four-wheel drive, get out and do some fishing or some other water sports. Just seeing so many four-wheel drivers out there, it's a free area, it's open to the public, and you've got people who are fishing, people who are wakeboarding, people who are doing a whole range of activities, people who are just parked on the beach, playing cricket, throwing frisbees. It's such a beautiful destination. The scenery, the water, everything about it is just so pristine. Now when we got there, when you get out onto the point, you can turn left or you can turn right. We sort of made a mistake and turned left, and the water was a lot deeper than we thought. As soon as we got off the beach, we made sure that our vehicles were thoroughly cleaned to ensure that they weren't going to rust and fall to pieces. And contrary to what all of the YouTube experts commented under that video when we aired it, those vehicles 2 years on are still fine, they're running and they haven't been sold. Double Island Point is unique, it's standout. I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10 for views. It's beautiful. Now my favourite track in Queensland is not going to be everybody else's favourite, but it is definitely going to be Beer Hill. Now that, guys, is an internet sensation. Everyone's had a crack at it, but for me the highlight was taking what is in effect a 5-tonne truck, the Iveco, successfully in one crack up Beer Hill. That was a ride that didn't rattle me, didn't make me nervous, didn't make me anxious until after I had done it. Once I'd done it and realised what I'd done, man, I was shaking like a leaf. That was it for me.
Woo! Woohoo! Yeah! Woo! Woo! Holy! Oh yeah!
Oh, holy moly, far out. The Springs 4x4 Park has a great amount of trails from simple touring stuff through to hardcore extreme tracks. The park owner is a fantastic bloke. They run events there, competitions there, they do a lot for their community, and it is a real central spot just out of Brisbane. So Beer Hill is definitely an achievement. I don't know if it's a track as such, but for me it's one of my favourite tracks to actually do as a challenge in Queensland. Whether you're doing it or watching, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Queensland, like many of the other states, is full of so many technical challenges. There is so much there to do, but it's such a big state also, like Western Australia. So when you take into account Cape York, Cairns, the Daintree, all of those locations, as well as outback Queensland, I'm going to call it a touring destination. Cape York actually isn't that bad. We're even planning a trip up that way shortly because there's still plenty to see and do, and a lot of history in those areas. So it's still well worth exploring. As a touring destination, Queensland's got a lot, but has it got more than the rest of Australia? I don't know. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. South Australia is another area that suffers from a lot of closed down tracks and limited areas to go four-wheel driving. But there are some hot spots, it's got some great technical four-wheel driving, and it's also got some really good touring opportunities. South Australia does of course have the incredible Flinders Ranges. We were recently there, and the four-wheel driving and scenery was both stunning. But the Eyre Peninsula is also well worth a visit. It's not so much hardcore four-wheel driving, but as far as touring goes, it's got plenty to offer and a stack of unique views and terrain. South Australia also has a number of beach areas we can get out and do some really cool four-wheel driving. What we found though was the sand was a lot softer than we expected. I'm going to tell you my #1 mistake in the last 20 years of four-wheel driving. 2 years ago, we were down in Canunda, filming for Life Off-Road on a trip going up northwest along the beaches. The biggest thing we weren't prepared for though, and what was a sudden shock for us, was just how soft and fine that sand became on those hot summer afternoons. Stuck on the beach with the tide coming in and the heavens opened up and it started raining. That was the toughest recovery I've ever done. We had to put out every winch extension rope we had, plus the full length of rope on the Iveco winch to try and recover one stranded vehicle in particular that ended up with a broken CV. But staying calm, working as a team, we got every person, every vehicle out safely, and we lost nothing to the encroaching tide, thank crikey. So my biggest lesson is when you get into that soft sand, guys, don't let the tyres down to 20. Don't let them down to 15. Keep going. 12, 10, and sometimes even lower PSI is where you need to be. Get your tyres at the right pressure and you'll be good to go on the soft sand. South Australia is well known for its touring and beach driving. The Flinders Ranges are also a famous area, but they're notoriously known for not having a lot of tough four-wheel drive tracks. We're now though starting to see that change, with a number of private four-wheel drive parks seeing the need for ecotourism and hardcore four-wheel driving as a combination to attract more customers, and they're cutting some amazing tracks which really lifts the technical challenges in South Australia. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10, and let's hope that those parks keep cutting those amazing tracks that they're cutting. My favourite destination though in the Flinders Ranges is one we've been to recently. It is the Southern Flinders Ranges and a couple of the four-wheel drive parks that we went to. They were all amazing, but two in particular stood out. The Southern Flinders 4x4 Eco Park and the Bendelby Ranges. One is new, the other one is very well established, but both are heading towards having some very challenging and technical tracks. My favourite track though would be up on top of the Hungry Ranges at Bendelby Ranges, and it would be Billy Goat Ridge. It's not a super hard track, but with those insane drop-offs on either side, it's like the Victorian high country but without any trees. That is absolute peril looking down the side of those slopes. The scenery is stunning, it's amazingly beautiful, and the rocks definitely keep you honest. Great views, a little bit of challenge. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. There are a stack of great views in South Australia, from the cave we explored on the Eyre Peninsula right through to the peak of Argidel Station. But my number one pick as the top view from South Australia would be the sunset at Bendelby Ranges. Like Double Island Point, you've got a lot of guests there watching it with you. It's a big collection of four-wheel drives, and the setting sun is just an intense colour sitting out to the west over the horizon. I'm going to give the view at Bendelby Station a 10 out of 10 for that sunset. It's one of those moments where you cannot take a bad photo. Whilst the four-wheel drive parks are really starting to get some great technical tracks going, I'm going to rate South Australia as a touring state for off-roading. As a touring state, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. From South Australia, let's head to the arid and tropical Northern Territory, a place which has a huge diversity of four-wheel driving. You've got the red centre all the way up to the mud, heat and tropical terrain of Howard Springs. Simpson Desert sits just within the Northern Territory, and it's one of my favourite spots for four-wheel driving for a number of reasons. First of all, it's easy to get to. It also has a very distinct start and finish. There are 1,100 sand dunes to cross, so getting from one side to the other is an achievement in itself. Now what you've got to remember is if you go from east to west, it's a little bit easier because of the way the dunes are formed. So start on the Alice Springs side with the sunsets behind you and finish with the peak of Big Red as the final challenge. This is the lifeblood of the outback. The Indigenous people knew all about it, and you'll see plenty of wildlife in those areas. The waterholes are pretty cold even in summer if you do dare to take a dip. But my advice wherever you go and whatever you do is don't do it in a mankini. The biggest challenge with the Northern Territory is distance. It's in the middle of Australia, it's in the heart of the outback, it's the red centre. It's harsh, it's unforgiving, but the distances you've got to travel from anywhere in Australia where most people live are huge. So be prepared with a long-range fuel tank, heaps of water, a good quality fridge, and all the gear you're going to need to be self-sufficient in remote areas. You're fairly isolated and the conditions are tough. I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10. Everyone talks about and plans trips to the West McDonald's. You've got a number of fantastic destinations, sites, scenes and attractions on that side. People though don't talk enough about the East McDonald Ranges, and that's where we headed on one of our most recent trips, to the iconic Ruby Gap. Ruby Gap is a destination that should be on your bucket list, but please do me a favour and don't rush it. Make sure you spend a minimum of 2 nights in there and take the time to explore as far as you can up along the gorge. It is beautiful, it's stunning, you'll find waterholes, you'll find amazing scenery, and you'll take the most amazing photos you've seen from any destination in Australia. It's a stunning, remote location that I find is very spiritual. It obviously meant a lot to the local Indigenous people, and it's got some funny humour. Everybody thought that the garnets in the sand were rubies. So there was a real ruby rush on there of people thinking they were going to be rich, who only found out after dragging a shovel, a spade, a wheelbarrow, all that way out of Alice Springs, that they're just worthless garnets and there was no riches to be found. So the history is quite ironic. The destination though speaks for itself. For total experience and for what I gained personally out of that, I'm going to give that a 9 out of 10. One of my favourite views on those trips we've done to the Northern Territory is within that area, the East McDonald Ranges, and it's coming into one of the camping areas we stayed close to sunset. That golden glow of the setting sun on that red ochre rock, it was just so incredibly outback. You can't fault that as a view or a destination. The best view is time dependent, but when you get there and those rocks are glowing the way they were, that's an 8 out of 10 view. The Northern Territory is definitely a touring state. You've got big distances, great scenery, plenty of things to see and do, but so much history and culture to learn about. From Kakadu down to Alice Springs, I'm going to give that a 9 out of 10 as a touring destination. Last but not least is New South Wales. It's another big state that offers so much, from the outback in the west to the Blue Mountains in the east. The Darling River Basin also takes up a huge chunk of New South Wales, and that comes to a peak down south at Tolano Station. It's a beautiful property where we've spent a fair bit of time and we learnt a lot about the local agriculture and the water issues they're facing. The big challenge with New South Wales is the closure of tracks specifically around Sydney. Over the last 20 years, we've seen a huge amount of some of the most legendary epic rock trails just out of Sydney closed down, chained off within national parks and lost forever. Some of those tracks were on advertising material for ARB air lockers back in the day. There's some memorable photos that us older people will remember of the scene, and it is so sad to see those tracks gone. Track closures right across Australia are a big problem, but the challenges they're facing in New South Wales, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10. That's a serious concern. My favourite area of New South Wales would be Broken Hill and the tracks and views out past the Mundi Plains. Some of the best four-wheel driving we've done in Australia, though, is actually on the east coast of New South Wales, just south of Sydney in the Nowra region. And that's a track that we call affectionately the Monkey Gum Fire Trail. That track is an extreme all-terrain challenge that you've got to put a full day aside for. You've got to have fully equipped vehicles, plenty of clearance and good spotters, and be prepared to take your time to get around some of the tougher obstacles. There's plenty of extreme stuff in there if you want to go harder, and there's plenty of challenge for anybody else who gets onto that track. It's tough, it's remote, it's treacherous, and it is a major challenge, but it's definitely up there as one of my favourite tracks we've done in the last 20 years. I'm going to give that a 9 out of 10. It's a serious challenge. My favourite view in New South Wales would be the Mundi lookout. You might remember the scene from Mad Max 1 where the tanker full of sand went down the hill, rolled over and crashed on the corner. That's filmed in that exact location. It is a beautiful, amazing scene that you come up over this rise, you look out across the Mundi Plains, and it looks like Australia is absolutely endless. You're looking out across the outback into the setting sun. It is an absolutely unique, stunning, once-in-a-lifetime, must-do bucket list experience. That is an insane outback view, well worth it, 8 out of 10. New South Wales, because of its history in rock crawling, the Tough Truck Challenge and a whole range of other events, offers a whole range of technically challenging four-wheel driving. So whilst it's got plenty of touring out the back out west, I'm still going to give it a technical rating as a great four-wheel drive destination. Technical, New South Wales has still got some really cool, really tough tracks. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Now before we finish this video, and while we're on the topic of New South Wales, let me just remind you that we are just back from an amazing trip filming within the Blue Mountains. So guys, here's a little teaser to show you just how exciting our coverage of the Blue Mountains on your 4x4 is going to be over the next few weeks. We're heading to the Blue Mountains for something very, very different. We're looking for culture, history, views, scenery, and plenty of off-road excitement. This is going to be a very special trip. There's going to be plenty to see and do, and I reckon a stack of things are going to go wrong. Oh! So hang around as your 4x4 takes you to some of the best spots in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, baby!
One of the steepest roads I've ever driven on.
And we see just how deep it gets, and it's up over the bonnet.
And then all of a sudden, boom, the front left goes up.
The grunt to the V8. It was exciting.
That was deep.
Best thing you can do is get out with a bunch of mates and enjoy this great country of ours.
Nothing better.
Well, that's it, guys. We've looked at the pros and cons, the challenges, and the best four-wheel drive destinations and tracks in every state of Australia. I'll tell you what, guys, I don't know who the winner is, so let's tabulate the results. Let's go through the data. Let's get the scores out there and find out who is the winner for the best state in Australia for off-roading. Crikey, who came up with these scores? WA came first, with NT just behind, and our favourite places to go four-wheeling, my home state Victoria and Queensland, are at the bottom of the list. This has to be rigged. Well guys, that's just my personal experience on travelling Australia over the last few decades. Let's hear about your ideas, your top locations, your favourite spots and the reasons why you love four-wheel driving so much in those destinations in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. For now, we'll see you on the next adventure and the next video.